So it's my absolute pleasure here to be hosting this hydrogen panel with a very amazing group of experts. My name is Schindelar. I'm the president of Energy Intelligence Group. We're an information provider for the energy industry. So we've got the illustrious honor to talk about hydrogen for the next 50 minutes. And I think we can safely say hydrogen's been a bit of a roller coaster over the last couple of years. People had thought that hydrogen was going to be the sort of silver bullet to solve all the world's decarbonization problems, the one that would be able to produce that zero carbon energy source to fix and replace hydrocarbons almost everywhere. But I think as we've seen in the last 12 months or so, those expectations have come back to earth an awful lot. And with hydrogen not critically being able to solve that affordability problem, which is a key part of the equation. And policy has been a bit patchy. I think we've seen that, complex or insufficient, and technology costs just simply aren't coming down as fast as they should do or people had hoped. And for those involved in hydrogen in a long time, which many of our panelists have been, some for decades, they've actually seen this show before. Back in the 90s, there was also a major hype in hydrogen that everyone thought it was a solution, and then that quickly came back down to earth. But as one of my panelists said in the lead up to this event, he said, well, you don't need hydrogen to answer every question. So from our research at Energy Intelligence, we see certainly hydrogen going from about 100 million tons currently up to 200 million tons in the next decade or potentially more, depending on how things develop. And that's still a lot of hydrogen and a lot of hydrogen to also decarbonize. So there's tons of opportunity here. And so what we want to do in this panel is separate the decarbonization aspirations from the whole cold, hard facts of costs and policy uncertainty. In essence, what is the future of hydrogen now? How do we see it? So I've got 6 incredible panelists here. We're going to try to get through them all in this 50 minutes. We've got Yoshinori Kanehana. He's the chairman of Kawasaki Heavy Industries. We've got Dr. David Burns. He's the vice president of Clean Energy in Linde, all the way down there. We have Dr. Malhotra, who's the president of the Hydrogen Association of India, all the way down on the end. We've got Maurits Van Tol, CEO of Catalyst Technologies from Johnson Matthey. We've got Nobu Miyaki, CEO of Ebara Elliott Energy. And finally, Phil Caldwell, CEO of Ceres. Welcome, gentlemen. Let's get right into it. So Yoshinori, I'll start with you. Obviously, Japan has set very ambitious targets. They put out 3 trillion yen worth of potential subsidies to deal with the contracts for difference between the price of hydrogen and the actual hydrocarbon costs. There's a basic hydrogen strategy that's targeting 3 million tons by 2030, 12 million by 2040, about $100 billion allocated to that, so quite impressive amount of money. And Kawasaki's been in the hydrogen business for 40 years. So why don't we start with you, set the stage. How is hydrogen coming back to earth now? What's a realistic path for hydrogen? Is it going to be a solution to the decarbonization problem, or will it stay a sort of niche energy source?
Yep. Thank you very much, Alex. And first of all, thank you very much giving me the time to be the panel today. We are the Kawasaki Heavy Industries. We started handling liquefied hydrogen from more than 40 years ago. You know, the place called Tanegashima in Japan, it's a space rocket launching place. So the fuel for the space rocket is a liquefied hydrogen. So we built the large tank and the supply system of liquefied hydrogen in Tanegashima more than 40 years ago. So we knew how to handle the liquefied hydrogen. And 15 years ago, we as a company set the strategy to build up the supply chain of liquefied hydrogen. And we worked with the government, and 3 years ago, we built world's first liquefied hydrogen carrier, so-called Suiso Frontier, and which can carry the 75 tons of liquefied hydrogen. And we did 3 round trips between Australia and Japan. So as you know, the liquefied hydrogen is minus 253 degrees centigrade, cryogenic liquid gas. But many people misunderstanding, to carry this liquid hydrogen, we don't need any energy. We have a large tank with the vacuum insulated double hull tank, so we don't need any energy to keep this temperature between continent A to continent B. So we did the pilot test, and now we are planning to do so-called Green Innovation Fund project, which Japanese government gave us the $2 billion budget, and we are going to build a large ship which can carry 2,500 tons of liquefied hydrogen. So by 2030, we will bring liquefied hydrogen from outside Japan, possibly Australia or possibly Middle East. We haven't decided yet, but by 2030, we will bring the large volume of liquefied hydrogen from outside Japan to Japan. And your question, the project of hydrogen is slowing down. And many projects is slowing down because they couldn't find out the off-taker. At the moment, the cost of hydrogen is expensive compared to the fossil fuel. So the Japanese government, with a 3 trillion yen budget, they call it the Hydrogen Society Promotion Act. They passed the diet last year, and they will subsidize the capex, as well as they will support the price difference between hydrogen and the fossil fuel. So we must start a project by 2030. Of course, we will raise a hand. But the important point is we must take off-taker with us. We must take somebody, commit to use the hydrogen we bring from country A to Japan. So we should take off-taker, otherwise we will not be approved by the Japanese government. And we already found off-taker, so we will raise a hand. So hopefully we will establish the large volume hydrogen supply chain by 2030.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. And thanks for bringing up the issue of markets. I want to go to David now, who can talk a bit about this. Obviously, Japan has put some good supports in place, but David's building plants in the US and in Canada, which have their own sort of support systems. But talk about markets a bit. It is a big problem. You're a big producer of hydrogen. How are you finding buyers to pay the premium for the hydrogen you're producing?
Right, and it's not just paying the premium, it's also paying the premium over a long period of time. We need long-term contracts to justify the investment we're making. As you mentioned in the US, for instance, we're talking now about low carbon hydrogen, blue hydrogen. We've made some significant investments in the US, a blue hydrogen to ammonia project for OCI/Woodside, it's about $2 billion plus. That's really driven by incentives, 45Q incentives they're called, for sequestrations. That really helps drive down the cost. And it so happens that blue ammonia today produced in the US would be cheaper than gray ammonia produced in Europe. So it gives a little bit of security there. But I think also looking at Korea and Japan as being long-term off-takers for clean ammonia, it's a way of transporting clean hydrogen over long distances until hopefully in the next decade or so, we have the opportunity to move liquid hydrogen, as mentioned earlier. So I think that's maybe end of this decade, next decade. So that's one project in Texas there, $2 billion plus that's underway. Another project in Canada where there's some carbon taxes as well as incentives, tax incentives, etc., which are creating the opportunity for, in this case, Dow, to decarbonize our ethylene complex. Really, it's fuel switching, where we're taking the off gases and natural gas they use today in the furnaces, converting that to hydrogen, then they're firing that in the furnaces, and in that way, we're capturing the CO2 in the process and then sequestering it, and so that's the way of decarbonizing those operations. So again, in that case, carbon tax plus incentives is really making the economics work. And I think that's what we're seeing is if you like, blue or low carbon hydrogen projects. We're looking at the cost point for those, that those can work. There's a lot of talk around green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen. The problem there is the cost is much higher, and I think it's challenging to find the markets willing to pay that extra premium, not just for low carbon hydrogen, but for renewable hydrogen. When you look at the carbon intensity of blue versus green, there's not that much difference. So you're paying a lot for a small change in carbon intensity. And that's the challenge we're finding in Europe. They're very much focused on RFNBO compliant hydrogen, which really has to be green or renewable. But the challenge is nobody's willing to pay that. So that's where we have a large potential pent-up demand, but not the willingness to pay the premium that would allow for that. Certainly in Europe, hopefully in Japan and Korea, we'll start to see through the CFD auctions some demand pull, particularly on low-carbon hydrogen.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that. We'll come back to the cost question and how those costs are coming down, but let's go to Dr. Malhotra on the end. And we just heard about Japan, we heard about US and Canada. Let's talk a bit about India and what India is doing. We heard yesterday the targets of about 5 million tons per year of hydrogen by 2030, potentially going beyond that. And can you talk a bit about how India is going to achieve that? What are the challenges that are apparent here in the Indian market, and what can be done to overcome them?
You see, India has a national green hydrogen mission, as per which the target of 5 million tons has been fixed for 2030. We seem to be on track because there are commitments from the green hydrogen producers up to 7 million tons as of now. And as Minister also said yesterday, Minister Puri mentioned that we are likely to go beyond 5 million tons by 2030. Maybe we'll reach 7, maybe we'll reach 8. I don't know. Maybe things will pick up. The cost, of course, you said you will come back later, so I'll not talk about cost. The issue is about the availability of electrolyzers. That has been a problem for the manufacturers. Availability of electrolyzers is an issue. The government has been incentivizing the electrolyzer manufacturing besides incentivizing some of the green hydrogen production projects also. As far as the electrolyzer manufacturing is concerned, it is likely to pick up. But in the meantime, yesterday I was talking to someone here who said that because of President Trump going back on green hydrogen kind of thing, the electrolyzers globally may be available at a much affordable price. So maybe the Indian green hydrogen producers can look for an opportunity to import also some of the electrolyzers or lease out some of them, which will be available at an affordable price, so which will pull down the cost of green hydrogen production. As far as the other scenario is concerned, we presently consume about 7 million tons of hydrogen in our refineries and fertilizer units and other places. The demand is likely to go to 14 million tons by 2030. And if we have a target of 5 million tons, there should not be any worry. Many people are worried in India that if the 5 million tons come, who will take it? I believe that when the demand will be 14 million tons of hydrogen by 2030, the 5 million tons or 7 million tons can easily be absorbed. I'm worried about the rest of the hydrogen, whether it will be gray hydrogen or we can convert it into blue. So I've been, from our association side, we have been saying that we are also worried about the infrastructure creation, because at times the cost of storage and transportation of hydrogen can be even more than the cost of producing hydrogen. So we need to create infrastructure, and if we allow any color of hydrogen, irrespective of the color of hydrogen, if we allow that to roll out and let the market be created for hydrogen more, we can produce it much cheaper. We produce in our refineries about $2 a kg or less than that. So if that is going to the marketplace for decarbonization of various hard-to-abate sectors, because we will also be having a carbon credit and trading scheme also coming in. So maybe there will be demand, and by the time the green hydrogen, I'm saying that we should move ultimately to green hydrogen, but when the cost will come down, we should not be found wanting on the kind of infrastructure. You need to have supply chain systems in place so that by the cost comes down, hopefully by 2030, we should be ready to supply to the various demand centers of hydrogen. So that's the way I think it should be rolling out. That has been the perspective from our hydrogen association, that irrespective of the color, let us say, and we should also focus on carbon capture utilization side. Not only carbon capture and storage, but we need to focus more on carbon capture and utilization so that we can compensate for the cost of carbon capture by way of monetizing that carbon into some useful chemicals or products. And once there are targets defined for sustainable aviation fuel, decarbonization of hard-to-abate sectors, compliance markets rolling in, I think there will be a lot of demand for hydrogen. So that's the way I look at that. 5 million ton is really is not that much, and we need to ramp up that even more.
Good, thank you very much. We'll go to Maurits right now to talk a bit about this green-blue debate. Now, I think there's been a lot of focus to get away from the colors of hydrogen, but I think as we discuss it more on this panel, there's clearly a big difference between what's happening with blue and what's happening with green. So maybe Maurits, since you are kind of agnostic to green or blue, you can do both for clients. What do you see clients asking for most these days, and where do you see the future of these two colors going?
Yeah, it's very interesting in our field because when you look at our technology portfolio, we can cater for a lot of those conversion, and it's fascinating to be in this area because customers all around the world find different ways that can work, and that makes it very attractive. So when you look at green, so electrolytic low carbon hydrogen, let's not forget that is still in its infancy. Supply chains are not there yet. But also there, we need to give that a little bit of time to bring to scale because costs go down with scale, and also the oil and gas industry had 100 years to perfect to the situation where they are today. The price of electrolytic hydrogen scales for, what is it, about 80% or so with the cost of electricity. So when you look at the current deployment rate of renewable electricity around the world, in many countries, it's mind-boggling. So also there, you see costs go down, the cost of production go down, and making green more attractive. Already, if you look at the cost of production now versus only 3 years ago, it has gone down tremendously. So in that sense, I'm not afraid that it won't go down further with scaling of renewables. When you look at blue, we have two technologies in our portfolio for the generation of low carbon hydrogen from natural gas with CO2 storage or use for that matter. What you see there is, of course, in areas where there is an abundance of natural gas at very low prices. I mean, Henry Hub is still very attractive, as also David says. In that sense, there is no reason not to go blue. And when we design once, build many times, we also scale that industry. The price differential will be smaller and smaller. We should also realize we don't need to boil the ocean. Energy sector, chemical sector are huge. If you can just convert the first 5 or 10% of customers with a willingness to pay, also this is good old marketing, it's just customer segmentation, we'll get there, bring an industry to scale, drive costs down, new segments that we can address. So also there, we see a future for both. It's not or. I think what you will see is, of course, when you look at blue, that's available now at scale. If you call Johnson Matthey on Monday morning at 9, at 10, you can have a contract for the size that you want, and it will come with the warranties because we have done this for so many decades, and we help you with the bankable proposition there. For very large scale green, also there is the first orders coming in for very large scale units, but of course it is still, again, rather nascent. Give that a little bit of time. Post 2030, we will see the cost go down, and we will use both. And hydrogen is a very versatile molecule. That's the wonderful thing. If we need SAF because of mandates, so there must be there's a legal drive and some willingness to pay. If you have biomass, it contains a lot of oxygen. Same with municipal solid waste, and we have technologies to convert it into jet fuel, or other fuels for that matter. But the thing is, if you add hydrogen, you boost the yield, you convert more of your biomass into useful products. So also there, it is like, the wonderful thing is you connect the chemical and energy space, so you have many more different outlets and customers and also many different situations that are different around the world. And by connecting, cleverly the different technologies, you can still make money also in the onset and help the industry to scale.
I mean, a quick follow-up on that, just on what David had said. I mean, obviously, there's a stigma on blue hydrogen, it seems, particularly in Europe and in other places as well. Do you see that still kind of having customers think twice about it?
It's changed. It has really changed from the very dogmatic discussions a few years ago, because there's, it was the discussion on, is it transitional? No one's going to invest in these massive plants for 7 years or 10 years. It's for 30 years plus, and you need 15 years plus to have some decent, the payback's getting started. So that's not going to work. And it's also not necessary, because there is a lot of countries that still find a lot of gas. They want to do something for it. In some areas, they also need the money desperately to bring the population to the middle classes. So, and who are we to deny that? And it's also not necessary, because if you use Johnson Matthey's technologies that are excellently suited for the capture of CO2 and the storing it at very high purity, relatively low costs, I mean, the carbon footprint of those molecules of hydrogen that you produce can compete with many of the green hydrogen that's produced today. There's quite a significant overlap there on carbon footprints. That's why we need to move away from just the colors, like David also said, but really look at what's the carbon intensity of the molecules you produce in your situation. And then I think also blue is a fantastic solution, because we can deploy it at large scale now, avoid CO2 molecules to be emitted into the atmosphere now, so the impact will be very, very sizable.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, Phil, we'll come to you last on costs, but first I'm going to go to Nobu and talk a bit about, because your company is now getting involved in hydrogen, you've been involved in compressors and turbines for a lot of years, so I'll ask you a similar question to what Maurits just addressed. I mean, do you see clients asking you for specialized compressors on hydrogen, or are they still going for kind of straight natural gas?
Okay, thank you very much. So that's a very interesting question. And as we're discussing, I think at least for the next 4 years, especially in the US, and due to the change of the administration, maybe I think the initiatives or pace for moving to the green world is maybe slow down. But definitely, I think the world is, especially our current industry, oil and gas, is under the big pressure for the decarbonization. So our belief is the world is definitely moving to the green world in the future. But we cannot jump into that kind of the completely green world over the night. So that's why there should be some steps in order to reach to that perfect green. So actually, as we know, even LNG is regarded as a kind of the best optimal solution in terms of the CO2 in the existing fossil fuel. So I think that's why there should be the other reason, many countries are interested in the LNG. But LNG. So after LNG, our belief is the situation is moving to maybe blue hydrogen. We already started, but eventually to the green hydrogen. So I think regardless of the customer's preference or a world preference, there should be the step in order to reach to this kind of the perfect green world. So I think our mission, really we like to work together with the customer or end user from our point of view, because instead of just waiting for the kind of specification from our customer, we like to work together with my customer or end user to come up with kind of best solution for the hydrogen. But again, there should be the step in order to reach that stage. So.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. All right, Phil, we're on to you, on to the question of costs. And we talked a lot about colors, a bit about markets, but maybe let's talk a bit about how quickly we see costs coming down. I think the estimate is we need to get hydrogen down to around $2 a kilogram to make it competitive with existing hydrogen sources or other energy sources, particularly in fields outside industrial use. So do you think we're going to get there by 2030, or we still have a long way to go?
I think it depends on where you think getting there is. I think when we talk about cost, what Ceres does is we develop world-leading technology for solid oxide, both for electrolysis and for power generation. And my friend from Johnson Matthey just said, when we're talking about green hydrogen, the majority of the cost is actually coming from the energy. And you talked about hype cycles. I've been in this industry long enough to remember the first one. People underestimate how quickly these transitional technologies take, but they also underestimate the impact that they make as well. And on what I observe happening is people have grabbed the technology that's available. In India, that's alkali today. But alkali is only at best, you need 50 kilowatt hours for every kilogram of green hydrogen you produce. If you take an advanced technology like the solid oxide technology we're going to deploy this year with Shell in Bangalore, you're going to be less than 37 kilowatt hours per kilo. So already that has a big impact, 25% lower on the operational cost. But also there's a knock-on effect. You need 25% less upstream renewables. You need 25% less storage. You need 25% less transmission and distribution. And when we talk about cost of hydrogen, you need to talk about the levelized cost of ammonia or levelized cost of steel or levelized cost of synthetic fuel that it actually goes into, because there's a lot of benefits from integrating these technologies into the process industries that we have today. So, I mean, we had a panel before with Dr. Malhotra, and we were saying, you're not going to get to $1 a kilo, but if you get to this $2 to $3 a kilo, you're in the game. You're in the ballpark of what can be achieved. And don't forget, with blue, you've got to add on the cost of storage, and storage technology is, it depends on where you are in the world. I think the other thing about cost is we're privileged at Ceres is that we license technology globally. So we have partnerships in Japan, in Korea, in India, Taiwan, etc. And the transition is different from different people. So if you're in the US or the UK, we have assets in the UK that make blue a very attractive technology for storage and for generation, etc. In India, your asset is going to be your renewable energy. And the opportunity is to change that green electron into a green molecule. So I'm not sure I agree that you should be buying in electrolyzers because the Americans don't want them anymore. You should actually be making them here. And when you look at the cost of electrolyzers today, all the Europeans are afraid of China. So if you look at the Chinese costs now, the electrolyzer costs are about a third of what they are coming out of a European manufacturer. The only way you can deal with that is it's not going to be with tariffs. It's not going to be with trade restrictions. You need to localize supply chains, and you need to scale manufacture. And you're not talking about huge scale to get to, somebody said it, if you get to that first 5%, you really get the scale. So again, the technologies that we have at Ceres, we're not using as much rare earth materials, we're not using iridium, we're using common steel, and we license technology to enable the localization and scale up. I see India as being competitive with China. There's no reason why India can't compete with China on cost. That's the CapEx side. The OpEx side, it's all about efficiency. So I think we're going to see more and more progress on coming down cost curves. I think my final point on cost, most of the players in the industry today are relatively small as electrolyzer manufacturers. The people that we now license to are major Fortune 500 companies with the balance sheets to do that. If you're really going to push through cost, you need scale, and that's why we license to some of the bigger companies in the game, like Bosch, like Denso in Japan, like Doosan in South Korea, because they have that manufacturing capability, that supply chain strength, and the balance sheet you need to actually get down that cost curve.
Great, thank you very much. I mean, David, I'll pick up a comment that we were making ahead of this panel on China, because it hits on what Phil talked about. I mean, often when we talk about electrolyzer costs, where I sit in Europe, people lament how expensive electrolyzers are, and that hydrogen's never going to be affordable. They talk over $10 a kilo is what it costs to build some of these plants in Europe. But then people say, yes, but have you looked at what's happening in China? And you can see that you can do it for a fraction of the costs. And surely that gives you a lot more hope that green hydrogen is a lot closer. But David, what we were discussing is sort of, you can build the things in China, but if you take that electrolyzer and stick it in Europe from China, your costs change a bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, but you mentioned it's a third of the cost in China, for instance. I think by the time you take that, say the stack, and bring that into a European or US setting, and you put the balance of plant around that, you're not seeing a third of the cost. The challenge is a balance of plant. That's not new technology. That's old technology. There's not going to be any breakthroughs in cost on that. So you can see costs come down, say, on the stack, but that's only, 40% of the total cost of an electrolysis facility. So even if you cut that in half, you're only seeing a 20% reduction in the total the capital cost, right? And as you said, if 70% of the total cost of the hydrogen produced is based on power, you're getting a 20% reduction on 40%. So you're not seeing these big step changes in cost with Chinese technology. So it all comes down to the cost of power, the availability of the power, so that you don't have to overbuild capacity. That's a big factor in capital as well. Being able to run at 100% availability has a bigger impact, I think, than where you're sourcing from in many cases. So that's a challenge we see with green. And so, looking at ammonia, $10 a megawatt hour power cost translates into something like $100 a ton on an ammonia basis, right? So getting down to less than $2 a kilogram using alkaline, you're needing power less than $40 a megawatt. You don't see that in Europe. You don't see that in the US, right? And that's forgetting the capital part of it. So there was a lot of challenges. And put it in context, it's a very nascent technology, looking at tens or hundreds of megawatt scale. The project we're doing in Canada, the blue hydrogen project for Dow, if you translated that into doing it through electrolysis, you would need to install something like 4 to 5 gigawatts of electrolysis and attach it to something like 7 gigawatts of power. That's kind of the scale of the project. You can't do that today, but you can do that as a blue project tomorrow. We're doing it today, actually. So you can. This is kind of the scale and the kind of the challenge we face. But I think green will get there, but we've got a few years to go yet. It's still very much a nascent technology.
Yeah, look, I think those points are valid, but you cannot. The one thing that is imperative is you have to get the green technologies more efficient on the power side.
Yeah,
that does have a big knock-on effect on the levelized cost of ammonia.
Yeah, if you're using 55 kilowatt hours per kilogram alkaline versus 37
solid oxide.
Yeah, there's a big difference.
Yeah, good. No, thanks for that. So I want to talk a bit about transport here, and Yoshinori already brought up how Kawasaki is moving hydrogen by liquefying it, which is not often what you hear in the industry. Many people are using ammonia or methanol to move it across long distances, but there's a cost issue associated with hydrogen and moving it from one country to another. So maybe talk to us a bit about the cost side of this.
Okay.
How do you make this make sense commercially? Because I think a lot of people are scratching their heads saying, how do you liquefy it at negative 250 and use no energy?
Thank you very much. As I explained, we are planning to build a large ship, which is a 40,000 cubic meter, the capacity. But it's a middle size. Our final goal is 160,000 cubic meter. And according to our calculation, if we transport the hydrogen, liquid hydrogen from Australia to Japan by this large ship, 160,000 cubic meter, the transportation cost is 20 cents per kilogram, which is 10% of the target price, $2 per kilogram. So many people are thinking the transportation cost is expensive, but if we make it a large scale, it's not. So if we make the 160,000 cubic, it's a size of LNG carrier at the moment. So the transportation cost of LNG is very cheap at the moment because of the scale. So same thing on hydrogen. So we already designed the 160,000 cubic meter, the tanker, large tanker for the liquid hydrogen. And the 2/3 of a scale model is a big, like a 30 meter diameter, the cubic. We did the test already, so that we can carry the liquid hydrogen in this scale. So maybe hopefully by 2035, we can complete this large ship, which can contribute to reduce the transportation cost significantly.
So do you see you see a viability in moving hydrogen across long distances. It doesn't have to be produced next to where you're going to be using it.
Right. We just vaporized. And when we vaporize the liquid hydrogen, that produces negative energy. So if you have a data center right next to the unloading terminal, you can cool down the data center. So that's the beauty of liquid hydrogen.
Yeah, very good. Maurits, I want to follow up on that because obviously you guys are big into ammonia and methanol. Maybe you can talk a bit about transportation costs on when we talk about this sort of method.
Yeah, it's a very interesting space. I think everyone thought that transporting liquid hydrogen is going to be prohibitively expensive, but we just heard that there is a lot of progress in that field. That will avoid also then, I think, very expensive plans for long distance kind of pipe transportation. And of course, another thing that we see a lot is because we're the number one in methanol licensing, whether traditional methanol or e-methanol, we see actually quite a lot of customers produce the low carbon methanol molecule and put it either in the pool so that you can make your low carbon intensity formaldehyde or other follow-up products, but also per se, it is of course a tradable commodity at large scale with bunker facilities all around the world in harbors. So this is really a molecule that the shipping industry really wants. So you have these flexi fuel engines that you see now in many of the new ships. And you can use then methanol to, in that sense, transport the hydrogen contained, the energy contained in the original hydrogen molecule. So methanol is, to be very honest, that pipeline is extremely full with opportunities and growing very, very rapidly. And then the other thing is, of course, with ammonia, it's still, the verdict is still out. We have the technology for also the cracking of ammonia in our portfolio. So there are projects looking at producing hydrogen, then ammonia, ship it, crack it, and use the hydrogen at the point of cracking. So you also see those development. It's all possible. But again, depending on where you are on the planet and the economics of your endeavor, customers make different choices. And that's the great thing. There's a lot of flexibility here to tailor the whole production and transportation logistics to the needs of the final customers. And of course, the transportation sector. If you can piggyback on existing infrastructure, that makes it a lot cheaper. That's why also, for example, ESNG is another molecule that, we've been working on synthetic natural gas for 120 years in the company. And that's a complete revival now as well, of course, because at the end of the day, you can take CO2 and low carbon hydrogen, make your synthetic natural gas, and you can inject it in the existing gas pipeline. So you don't need to invest in that transportation infrastructure. Side effect is permitting in many countries takes a long, long time, certainly in Europe. So you gain a lot of speed if you can inject it in the transportation facilities that are already there. So.
It's fascinating. So, I mean, do you think that one technology is not going to win out here? That you're going to have multiple pathways in the end, or will eventually we'll get to one that will make absolute sense?
I think it will be multiple pathways for several reasons. It is, of course, on what are the raw materials, the renewables you need to work with, what's the local need, what infrastructure is already there, but there is also a political element. That if you as a country hedge your bets a little bit and are not dependent on just one molecule, that's probably a very good thing, because there is then different ways to fulfill the needs of your chemical industry, your energy industry, and energy intensive industries, by the fact you have flexibility which molecules to use, and create some competition, but also some independence. And I think that is certainly a drive that you see as well. So it's economics, geology, geography, but it's also independence.
Very good. Dr. Malhotra, can you talk a bit about how a carbon price in India will be changing the kind of equation when we talk about production of clean hydrogen, and how this will potentially impact the ability to sort of unlock more projects and potentially find export routes into other markets?
You see, India has already planned to put the carbon credit and trading scheme in place. in next few months, and certainly during this year, we are likely to see compliance markets coming in, and workforce voluntary will be already there. And in the compliance markets, the first will be hard to abate sectors like cement, steel, and with CBAM, India is exporting steel also to Europe, and with CBAM coming in, I think there will be demand for green hydrogen also, which will pick up. And then I just said that if the green hydrogen cost comes down a bit from say about $3 to $4, or at present to about $2.5, some carbon credits being available, and then compliance markets forcing some of the steel units, cement units, even refineries, the government has been contemplating that there will be some obligation on the part of refineries to use green hydrogen to reduce their gray hydrogen usage over the years. So that type of compliance and obligations to use green hydrogen will, make it more popular. Having said that, besides the carbon markets, one more thing which I would like to tell you is about the transportation sector. In India, we have been trying to develop some of our trucks which will run on hydrogen because there has been a lot of emphasis on EVs, particularly for cars and two-wheelers. But certainly the trucks cannot carry the battery load, they have to take the cargo load. So people have been working on IC engine technology where there will be demand for hydrogen. And we are also trying to develop fuel cell technology. Once the fuel cell technology becomes cheaper, affordable, the fuel cells are twice as efficient as internal combustion engine. I always believe that if the energy consumption can be halved by the use of fuel cells, even IC engine based hydrogen, your hydrogen can be much more expensive or twice as expensive as compared to the fossil fuels like natural gas or gasoline and diesel. If you use that in trucks, based on the energy content they have and the kind of efficiencies you can get besides lower emissions, I think that's the way to go about. That will make hydrogen more affordable in different sectors like, as I said, steel, cement, mobility also to some extent. This will make hydrogen, green hydrogen more popular. Still, I believe that till such time the green hydrogen price comes down to around $3 a kg, it will be difficult to adopt. So maybe some blue hydrogen side by side. And another route which in India is about green hydrogen is the bio-based hydrogen. We have a lot of biomass available in this country. We have a lot of waste available. There are projects being done on waste to hydrogen. Compressed biogas is being produced where government has been supporting those kind of projects. There are oil companies which are buying compressed biogas at a guaranteed price. And some of the, one of the leading oil company has been trying to convert that compressed biogas to hydrogen for use in refineries to circumvent the obligations which they will have to use green hydrogen. So that hydrogen is quite affordable. The prices which we have estimated with the biomass based hydrogen is much lower, even comparable to the gray hydrogen. But the issue is the collection of biomass. If things can be put in place for collection of biomass on which people are working, then that also is a possible option. So there are, as was said, multiple pathways for producing hydrogen will have to be used. Infrastructure need to be created. Once the demand is there, the infrastructure will happen. So I think the scale of green hydrogen production will also reduce the cost. So I think we have to wait and watch. There are a lot of, government has also been supporting in a way that interstate transmission charges for green electricity have been waived. Government is allowing banking of green electricity so that you don't get green electricity 24/7. So during the day you can produce it and feed it to the grid. And when if you want to operate your electrolyzer 24/7, you can draw that power as and when you want. So these kind of schemes which have been put in place by the government are also quite good, and they will certainly give a big push to green hydrogen in time to come. Let's hope that the costs will certainly come with the kind of efficiencies which Mr. Ceres company has this SOEC 37 kilowatts. If you can pull it down from 55 kilowatt of electricity to 37, reduce the cost of electrolyzer by manufacturing in India. We can always produce in a most cost-effective manner in this country. Hopefully, India will be very cost-effective, and we have big hopes that India will be very competitive in green hydrogen prices as compared to all over the world.
Oh, very good. Okay, thank you very much. So I can't believe we've gone through like 48 minutes and not mentioned the word Trump or U.S. at all in this whole time. So maybe we just, in the few minutes we have left, talk a bit about the U.S. market. I mean, Nobu, you're based in the U.S. I mean, do you see any change in the U.S. market going forward based on what you see as in the new Trump administration?
Yeah, so as I said, and as all of us knows, like due to the change of the administration, I think that like initiatives for the green trend is maybe slow down, maybe, and obviously like for the fossil fuel, maybe I think that this is kind of again speeded up. But I think that my belief is, as I said, is even I think the next 4 years, maybe we have to see the little bit change of the gear in terms of the progress of the green effort. But really, I think the overall trend, even in the US, is really, I think the country recognize they have to go to the like eventual goal. So as I said, we have to see some slowdown for the next 4 years or 5 years. But I think my belief is the overall trend will not be changed. So,
excellent. Okay, well, I think we'll have to wrap it up there. We're at the end of our time, but I think we heard quite a lot of interesting comments here. Certainly, this question around the ideological sort of barriers around blue hydrogen sounds like it might be weakening a bit, which is interesting and maybe opens up a window for blue hydrogen to get a bit more competitive. We heard the prices on blue hydrogen are quite competitive. We heard about transportation costs at extremely low for liquefied hydrogen, which is, I think, quite encouraging for people who want to get an export market. It's putting a bit of an upside on what has been a bit of a damp mood around hydrogen over the last couple of months at least. So I guess our conclusion is hydrogen is still going to be a critical part of the energy mix. It's going to be a bit different than we thought. There's going to be multiple pathways to get there. But you shouldn't be banking on it to solve all your energy problems. So with that, let's wrap it up. Thank you to my panel. Please give everyone a round of applause, all right?